comments from Israeli officials talking about, over a long period, but talking about the future security arrangements in Gaza. You talked a little bit about the sort of post-war future. I wonder, is there an agreement between the US and Israel on what that might look like? Who's actually going to be in charge? In the meantime, when they seem to be moving towards that, you've been talking about this as something that's going to happen off in the future, but they're actually moving to that situation. I think you've said before, you don't want to see the Israelis reoccupy Gaza. Isn't that kind of what we're heading towards?
There is no agreement. We do not want to see them reoccupy Gaza, which is why we continue to push for an alternative to that. And you've heard the Secretary say this, that absent a plan for security in Gaza after the conflict and absent a political path forward, you will end up with one of two things. One is Israeli occupation, or two is this state of anarchy where Hamas can reassert control. And neither of those are acceptable to us. We don't think either of those are in Israel's interest, obviously, either, which is why we continue to work on plans for an alternative proposal.
Specifically, Netanyahu said over the weekend that there's the possibility that Israel would need to establish temporary military control over civilian life in Gaza. Is that something that the U.S. would temporarily support?
We oppose military control. Look, they have temporary military control now, but we want to see that end. We want to see it transition to a different security environment and ultimately transition to a reunified Gaza and the West Bank. Now, you're not going to get there overnight. There has to be a transition plan. There has to be a path to get there. What that looks like and when a different authority can take control are all things that we need to work out with our partners in the region and ultimately with the government of Israel.
Do you think he's talking about this for a limited amount of time, or do you think he's trying to talk about this for an extended amount of time?
I wouldn't want to speculate.
Okay, and then he also made comments that after this intense phase of the conflict in Gaza concludes in the near term here, Israel will continue mowing the lawn in Gaza. Does the U.S. know exactly what Israel means by continuing to mow the lawn? And do you support that if there's no ceasefire in place?
So I don't know what he means exactly by that, but I think it probably means continued military engagement in Gaza. And for us, that's just a recipe for continued conflict, continued instability, and continued insecurity for Israel. It is obviously extremely harmful to the people of Gaza who want to be able to rebuild their lives and rebuild their homes and want to be able to chart a different future. But we think continued military action in Gaza just makes Israel weaker, makes it harder to achieve a resolution in the north. It adds to instability in the West Bank. It makes it harder for Israel to normalize relations with its neighbors. And so that's why we will continue to put forward what we believe is an alternative path that actually helps Israel's security, not one that weakens it.
And then just last question, you've obviously expressed U.S. concerns that Israel hasn't been fully focused on the day after conversations. Is that changing at all? Do you think Israel is taking any more seriously those conversations, given that they are planning to wrap up these intense operations? Do those conversations look a little bit different now?
They are a little bit more, they are somewhat more focused on it now. I think just by nature of the fact that they, by their own admission, are nearing the end of major military operations. So by nature, you have to look at what is going to come next. We want them to engage seriously on that. We want them to engage seriously with us on it. We want them to engage seriously with Arab countries in the region about it, because we do think there are ways to rebuild Gaza, to provide security for Gaza, to provide Palestinian-led governance in Gaza that ultimately will not just realize the aspirations of the Palestinian people, but will strengthen Israel's security. And so it's very much in their interest to engage in these conversations in good faith, and we encourage them to do so.
Sorry, I had one more. I forgot.
Okay.
There are these reports of increased looting and gangs in Gaza, and I wonder who the United States thinks the onus is on to try and drive that down. I mean, is it the IDF that should be creating more law and order? Is there a body that can do that? Like, how do you tackle that problem?
So that is an incredibly difficult question, obviously, because it goes to the heart of what comes next. Who provides security for the people of Gaza who just want to go about their daily lives? Mm-hmm. And right now, in the places where Israel has conducted military operations but no longer is there on the ground, you do see this anarchy, and you see Hamas in some cases reasserting control, which is obviously something that is incredibly dangerous for Israel. It's incredibly dangerous for the Palestinian people. Just look at the ramifications of the war that Hamas launched on October 7th. No one has suffered more than the Palestinian people from that decision. So that said, we don't want to see Israel occupy and have Israel soldiers providing security, because we think that just increases tension. It's not going to make Israel safer. It's certainly not going to benefit the Palestinian people. So we are working on proposals with our partners in the region. I don't want to detail them here for, I think, obvious reasons. We'll keep those conversations now, but it's a very important question that we are working quite hard on answering.
And those proposals might have to go into effect even if a ceasefire is not yet in effect.
I just wouldn't want to speculate. We want to get a ceasefire. We want to work on the day after things. Obviously, we would hope that they would align.
Okay.